Jocelyn Nungary, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Bret,
those families an apology?
It's a solid question. People are dead because you changed the policies of former President Trump. Do you owe those families an apology? It is a legitimate, fine, worthwhile question that was not answered well by Kamala Harris. Now, I make the argument that this could have gone much worse for Kamala Harris. For me, I'm Tony Katz. Tony Katz today. It's all eyes on this interview that took place last night. Kamala Harris, the vice president, the Democratic nominee, and Bret Baier of Fox. As we stated, this was something that could have been a problem for Kamala Harris and how she presented herself, a problem for Bret Baier and how he presented himself. This is what the other news outlets are saying about Bret Baier, the question being asked to former Senator Claire McCaskill, Democrat of Missouri.
How do you think the vice president did on Fox News yesterday?
Yeah, I think Bret Baier was rude. And it kind of surprised me how rude he was. Yeah. I've been interviewed by Bret Baier. I've been interviewed by Bret Baier. I understand that he comes at his interviews from a different perspective than maybe somebody who works at other news outlets than one that has appointed itself as the defender-in-chief of Donald J. Trump. But I thought she did fine. Listen.
What do you consider MSNBC? You thought that Bret Baier was rude? This has been a topic for the past, well, how long has it been? Let's call it 24 hours just for the sake of the conversation. We're friends. We can call it 24 hours. David Plouffe, who was with an Obama advisor, referred to it as an ambush interview. The minute you heard that, you should have said to yourself, well, they clearly don't think that she did well. If you're referring to it as an ambush interview, you do not think that Kamala Harris did well at all. You can't. What an absolutely awful and horrific thing to say, that you thought he was rude. Now, this is a conversation about the idea of interrupting. Let me share this moment with you. You tell me.
Ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump. You call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now he's unstable.
He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room. And he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
is. After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump.
Now, we can talk about her talking about Donald Trump. The only answer she gave was Donald Trump. It was the only answer that she gave. But what about that was interrupting? She was filibustering. She was trying to move the topic. He was staying on topic. And this is the only spot in the entire interview. And there's a whole story about how the interview was scheduled. First, I thought it was the full hour. Then you learn that it was only 25 to 35 minutes. That's it. And then you learn that Kamala Harris's team showed up late. Then you learn that they tried to shrink the time frame of the interview. They tried to make it only 20 minutes. So two things took place here. That Kamala Harris showed up late to the interview, and that her team tried to shorten up the interview. And he even during the interview is like, "Wow, your team really wants me to stop right about now."
Madam Vice President,
And
they're giving me a hard rap
Well,
here.
I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was it. Oh, so pleasant. Every answer was about Donald Trump. But that's not interrupting. That's about making sure you're focusing the conversation where it needs to be. If you want to argue that someone was argumentative, you would argue that it was Kamala Harris. But wasn't that the purpose? Isn't that something that you would then say, look how strong she was, look how tough she was, look how she didn't back down? But that isn't what media is saying. I mentioned Ed Marcy, who's a friend of the show, and he had put on the social medias, right, that this interview was going bad. Wow. I didn't think it was going to be this bad. And Joe Scarborough, MSNBC, Morning Joe, responds, yep, he was shockingly rude. So that's what started everybody at MSNBC and part of that show to push down this road. So the question is, why are they saying it? How does it help Kamala Harris for them to say, well, Bret Baier was just rude? You're still going after women voters, are you? Oh, that man, he wouldn't let that woman talk. He was trying to mansplain everything. You know how those men are. Is this the argument that you believe is going to work? And the answer is yes. Let me take it from the same network here. This is what we are supposed to believe is intellectual heft from the MSNBC contributor.
For whether you have the mettle to smash the obstacles in their lives that they can't smash on themselves, which they need leaders to smash for them. And I think that kind of thing, when you're up against that, it shows that to people. To pick up on a couple things Mika said, I thought were really important. I loved, Mika, that you used the word fascism, the other F word, the F word of this moment, because I think many of us in the media, particularly a lot of the newspapers, have been very, very reluctant to say what is clear, right? A tree is a tree, a river is a river, and fascism is fascism. It is a word with a dictionary definition.
Do you really think that media has been shy in using the word fascist? On Donald Trump? Anyone think that media has somehow been shy in going down this road? No. Let me check. No one does.
And if a tree is a tree, fascism is fascism. And this what is offered by Donald Trump and the Republican Party today is fascism. And we in the media need to say it. And the other thing that Mika brought up, which I just wanted to expand on for a second, is this notion of interruption, right? It was a tick in that interview, but it was almost interruptionism last night. I was watching this and it was like, this is interruption as an art form, interruption, and it started to feel like interruption as a metaphor for a rising new America, a new generation of leadership, a woman, a person of color in Kamala Harris trying to speak, and this kind of figure of the old guard who was offended at the notion that her voice had a volume, right? That her vocal cords made sound.
You can't possibly make that up? Bret Baier and Fox News were so offended by the idea that a woman of color is running for president, and so offended that she would say anything, that they invited her on the air to talk. They wanted to talk for 30 minutes or more. She shortened it to 20 minutes, yet somehow it's Bret Baier's fault keeping this woman of color from speaking. They say this with a straight face. They say this like they are to be believed. They say this like this is an argument. Notice they're not talking about what she said about policy. Notice they're not talking about how she handled herself. They're only talking about how terrible Bret Baier was. An insult to Bret Baier that he simply does not deserve. If they were smart, focused, I don't know, attuned to the situation, wouldn't they focus on her strength and her capability and being able to handle the tough questions and the tough interviews? And then we could argue that she didn't answer tough questions, this, that, and the other, but at least that would be something that would be compelling to a wider audience that might be curious. They are saying that Bret Baier was rude and Bret Baier was a misogynist, going after one argument, going after one segment only, which is women. Wait, I already thought they had women because of abortion. Not every woman is driven on the subject of abortion alone, but there are far too many suburban white women who are more than willing to be dopes and don't care about the price of eggs, don't care about the price of gasoline, don't care if fentanyl kills their kid, and don't care if their daughter has to sit on the sidelines while a boy claims to be a girl and takes their spot on pick the sports team. As long as they've got their abortion, well, then they're doing the right thing. Suburban white women are really a serious issue in any election. And this is who MSNBC and the others they want to play to? This is who to whom they want to reach? Wait, they don't have these people already? Because no part of this conversation moves any man. Zero. They thought that Kamala Harris was obfuscating, Kamala Harris was avoiding, Kamala Harris was dodging, Kamala Harris was bobbing and weaving, and there was Bret Baier trying to say, could we please get to the topic? Could we get to the subject at hand? And they don't see it that way. MSNBC pushing that way. Rude, misogynistic, not focused on the candidate and not focused on how the candidate answered the questions and not even saying what a good, strong job she did. It wasn't that she was strong. They're not even discussing it. They're saying, how dare a man treat her that way? Which makes her seem weak, which is nothing you would want for your presidential candidate. I always thought the Democratic Party was smarter than this. I thought they had more capability to see the field than this. I clearly was mistaken. I'm Tony Katz, and this is Tony Katz Today.